What have you learned so far about bibliotherapy today? We've been talking now since about 10 to 12. And what are the takeaways that you've got? What I'd like you to do right now is take your hand out, flip it over on the back side where it's plain, or maybe not, where there's lines, and because we double-sided. And just write down 2 takeaways that you have today that you've learned about bibliotherapy with your college population or with general populations. 2 takeaways. Okay, so Lynn can take this in an orderly fashion. Why don't we start over at that table right over there and have a volunteer. Yes, the table's been volunteered for you, but one of you talk about into the mic. What takeaway do you have from what we've learned over the last 2.5 hours?
Different ways to deliver bibliotherapy,
modalities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Modalities.
Okay. Was there any particular modality that struck you as helpful?
Oh, God.
Now that she's got lunch in her mouth. You're not sure. Okay.
One of the things I'm taking away is originally I thought of this as being the idea of it has to be the whole book presented and the whole book. And I really like the idea of it being able to go back and use a chapter, a passage.
Right.
That feels tangible. That feels like we can put it right in place.
Right.
We can analyze it quickly and talk about it. You know, I like that. That feels like something I can put into motion now.
Right. And do you know one of the research pieces that we found with college students who are becoming counselors? We found that book selection, when she prescribed to them, go out and find a book that you can read that will help you with a particular issue that you're working on in your life. Okay, she didn't identify the issue. She said, what is an issue is important to you. The process of self-selecting an important issue caused the students great angst because they had to self-reflect. That's the ownership and the power that comes when the client does the work for you. Second thing was this, the book selection process, finding the right book. Now, he's gone right now, but Mr. Shortbook, the guy who said a short book is important, okay, Mr. Shortbook said that you don't want to prescribe a book that's not going to be relevant. Joe. Okay, so Joe said the length was, you don't want to prescribe something and then, they go through 6 hours, they invest time, which of course is a piece of their life, and it doesn't work out. So the second part of what we found with our students was they had major anxiety about selecting the right book because they were in a course and it was time focused. They knew that they only had 8 weeks in this course and they better find the right book. So first they had to find the topic that was most important, and then they had to find the right material to address their problem or their situation. In the process of book selection, they sometimes changed their topic of what was most important to them, found a book that was very relevant, and they did a lot of it by trial and error. Looking at the book covers, reading the back flap, reading the inside, like here. You all do this when you go to a bookstore, right? You say, and if you open up the first page and before you know it, you're on the 5th, you know you've already hit home. That is a character you have just made friends with. That's exactly that book is going to be your next best friend. You'll be very sad, and like what I do when I get to the last 20 pages, oh, I think I'll just stretch this out. That's right. I don't want to say goodbye to a friend. But here, if life were fair, Jan Gallahue would still be at home in New Jersey with her sweet British boyfriend, Reeve Maxwell. She'd be watching old comedy sketches with him. She'd be kissing him in the library stacks. She certainly wouldn't be at the Wooden Barn, a therapeutic boarding school in rural Vermont. Okay. Are you intrigued? Yeah, okay. So, that's a good flapper. It's a page turner. It's, oh, okay, therapeutic. Do they still have therapeutic boarding schools? Okay, there you go. All right.
Dr. Bill, somebody wants to know what book was that?
Looks like Belzar. Yeah, Belzar. Yeah. 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 So that's part of the book selection process. Application, let's talk about application with anxiety, finding the right tool. Now, you have resources on your library website and some of the books, and one of the books that you've got listed is a very famous book for anxiety, which is, oh, here's Mr. Joe short book. Yes.
Well, especially with anxiety.
I know, yeah.
I can't get through them.
We were referring to the book length as part of the issue, and somebody was saying they're very relieved that we found out you don't actually have to read the whole book. Then we talked about the selection process too, and the angst of self-identifying your own topic, sorting through what's the most relevant thing and important in my life right now, and then finding the right book mesh. If you give a little pressure to a grade added to it, that does send students in the angst zone for sure. But we are going to talk a little bit about a particular information book and workbook that might be appropriate for some of your older students, okay? So I'll have it up on the web, but I'll get to it in a minute. So assessing the appropriate, is the book appropriate, and assessing the match. So we talked about those things before. What do you have to know about your clients? Okay, reading level, okay. All right. Interest level. Are they interested in an information book? You know, short book, long book, movie, whatever you want to prescribe. Do they want to discuss and read with you? Or they want to go and read at home and come in and process? The journal, cross-journaling. I like workbooks that actually evaluate. Someone reads and then they evaluate their own stuff, because students are, not that they're ultimately very narcissistic, but they tend to be pretty involved in their own process. And so they do like to talk about themselves, and the journal extends that. The writing in a workbook extends that, and then they share with you. So so you're doing ongoing therapy or counseling and ongoing assessment, formative assessment, as you're going through to find out what they're getting from it. So materials should allow you to continue your assessment. Okay, and we talked about read it first. Is there any particular time you wouldn't use a self-help workbook? Anybody think of a time you might not want to do that? What kind of student would be uncomfortable with a workbook? Aside from people who went to parochial schools and workbooks, and that's all we did for Diddle Masters for 45 years, but no, I'm just kidding. Workbooks, who might be uncomfortable with workbooks?
Moderate, students that are fragile and don't know how to moderate their or contain anxiety and feelings. And so I'm not sure I'd want them to be doing it all by themselves.
Okay, so more of a guided, structured approach. Yeah, because if you unleash some of those feelings when you're alone, it might not be appropriate, so if they're fragile. Another thing is if students are, have literacy issues but also are grade phobic, a workbook could really, you know, test anxiety. A workbook looks a lot like a test. And also if you write it down, there might be confidentiality concerns. So I always say to the students, it's your book, you get to keep it, you get to show whoever you want that book. If you write something down during our session, there's a shredder right next to my desk. So if you want to shred it at the end of our session, that's perfectly fine with me. And then I just put it in my case notes as best I can. I do that with art as well. Lots of times students who do art, they don't want anybody to see it. So I've shredded a lot of beauties. Yeah, but that's for confidentiality. It's not about keeping it, it's about their therapeutic gain. So, okay. So, all right. So, application with anxiety disorders, you can use it individually, one-on-one, reading at home, all the different ways we talked about before. If you are ever able to run an anxiety group or an anti-depression group, they're very powerful. And they can be not just intense group therapy, they can be psychoeducational. And I highly recommend psychoeducational groups because it normalizes things. A lot of people suffer from anxiety. If anybody's ever had an anxiety attack, it's terrifying, and a lot of people suffer from that. There's ways to not have anxiety attacks, but sometimes people don't know that until they have one. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah. So there's ways to work kind of through that. Sometimes people need medication. They don't know it. You know, they just kind of need it for that particular time. And so, so psychoeducational is really, really great. I like a combination of psychoeducational and processing. I really like to give clients information because I believe information is power. They can bolster up their confidence and deal with their life situation and try a few things out and then talk about it with others and then move on to the next topic. I'm not a big believer in long-term therapy forever because I call them tune-ups. You know, it's like people will come in for a developmental time, they'll work on an issue, they'll go out and they'll live their life, and I always say to them, if you'd like to come back for a tune-up at a particular time, or if you've graduated and you've gone to another environment, I can give you some information about individuals who'll be helpful for you if you need a tune-up. You know, you come back in, because you forget some stuff from counseling. You talk about a lot of stuff, you try a lot of things out, and you kind of forget, and sometimes life gets a little out of joint for a while, and then I call them tune-ups. People love that. Oh yeah, I think I need, and then I've had people call me or email me, Dr. Dale, I need a tune-up. And usually a tune-up's 1 or 2 sessions, and then they go back out. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I remember writing about that. Then they go back. Sometimes, you know what they just need? They need that connection with someone who was a mentor or someone who actually helped them through a particular time, and they don't have that person yet in their next transition. So that's part of it. Are you going to use it with a specific treatment? Have you identified that maybe it is anxiety, specific phobia? I worked with this one little girl who was really suffering from arachnophobia. And I lived in Idaho at the time, and we had hobo spiders. They're called hobo spiders. Has anybody ever seen a hobo spider? They are the biggest, meanest, ugliest looking things you've ever seen in your life. They're huge and they run fast. And they're called aggressive house spiders. So they actually chase you. So yeah. So why would a little person be, you know, scared, right, afraid of that? But she was also raised by parents who were environmentally correct. So we were teaching ways that she could, you know, deal with the spider. Like I was thinking, like kill it, you know. But she was thinking like taking it outside. So we talked about capturing a hobo spider could actually be more dangerous than, you know, whacking it, you know. So we just kind of, because you know it makes your skin necrotic if it bites you and all kinds of really scary things. But finally we did agree that she could spray it down with some Windex and sweep it outside because the Windex would not totally poison its skeletal system. So you have to negotiate things in therapy sometimes, but okay. So, but she also used a workbook on systematic desensitization and how to deal with spiders, and a lot of it was finding out information about spiders and what they can do and how they are dangerous and some not so dangerous and good, because she thought, you know, every spider was dangerous, and no, pretty much just the hobo spiders, you know, and a few other scary ones. So. So you can also, we talked before about planning, reacting, doing an action plan, and so forth. So you can pretty much tailor it and adapt it in lots of creative ways. How many of you like to be creative? Anybody like to be creative? Okay, so for you, what of all the different applications today I've talked about, what's resonating with you? Music, art, journaling, storying, cinema therapy, reacting and writing, reacting and reading. What kind of things are attractive for you? Some brave soul. Art, right. And you can use art in a lot of different ways, right? Right. And yeah.
I was thinking kind of more projective techniques, so starting out with a story about somebody and then saying, here's this character and these are the issues. So how would you handle it? Or what advice would you give to this
Can you do it again?
this character?
Repeat the question, please.
Projective, using
Yes, so I would like to use kind of story narratives as an open-ended
right.
giving some story behind the character, and then working with the student to say, how would you handle the situation if it was you, or what advice would you be giving
Right.
to this other character?
I would even take it a little bit further at first and use that same technique and say to Jose, so Jose, I'm going to tell you a story about first day at college, what happened to this student. You tell him that got there, couldn't find the parking lot, couldn't do this, couldn't do that, books fell into the water, I mean all kinds of things. I got to class, walked in, everybody turned and of course looked at him at the same time like, what are you doing here? That kind of look. And meanwhile Jose's sitting there and his heart's kind of going like this, like that. I said, what do you think Carrie should do? And then let's write a story about what happens next. So it's about Carrie, but you know it's going to be about Jose. So yeah, and that distances it just a little bit, and then over time they'll begin to tell you stories just about themselves. But it gives that little safety cushion. It's always an important piece. But that's great. Projectives are wonderful. Story starters are great. Stories about, after 9/11, there were many, many stories that kids wrote about planes, about crashes, about bombs, about buildings falling, and so forth. Lots and lots of stories. And in play therapy, we saw lots of kids building towers and knocking them down and so forth. They were really trying to get their head around this horrible thing that happened in our country. And that's a projective, telling a story and bringing it forward. Yeah, it's a great technique. Lots of ways to use projective. Writing, storytelling, And sometimes you can do group therapy, sit around, you can share a story, like, and then what would Jose do next? So you might say something like, what? Jose's books fell, the door opened, everybody looked at him, and Jose.
Hello, everybody.
Right. And
he made friends with everybody in the group.
Okay, and then who can continue with this but make it more of a disaster? Anybody have any ideas? Come on, I go over here. There we go. He said, hello everybody, and everything was going fine, and he had made some new friends, and then I go like this, and
then when he had to pull out his pen and paper, he realized he forgot his notebook and his pen in the car, and he had to turn to a neighbor and ask for one.
And when he asked his neighbor for one, the neighbor said,
I don't have any. So Jose was like standing there, didn't know what to do.
So Jose was standing there, didn't know what to do, and the next thing that happened was... Jose put his hand up to his head and laughed and said nothing. And then
the teacher asked why he wasn't taking notes.
okay, so you can really have a lot of fun with a story starter like that. What I didn't do, which was very unfair, was, especially to you, I didn't prepare you. I didn't prepare you for what we're going to do. But you can do something like that. You can story share. And then if somebody doesn't say anything, you just say, and then they turn red and lifted their head up, and then you just keep going around. You always tell everybody you can or cannot participate, and that's just fine, to do that. But that's a way of story sharing. And then when it's all finished and the story is over with, you sit down with the group, you say, I wonder how we can help Jose. Let's talk about some things that, we did that reading on what happens when you meet new friends and you go to a new environment. Let's talk about some things Jose could have done. Oh, he could have left earlier. He waited till the last minute because he was nervous. Oh, but he could have left earlier. He probably wouldn't have dropped his books. Could have done this, could have had a map of the campus, lots of things, for problem solving. But you can't fix it right away until you kind of get an assessment for how crazy a day can go. And days can go crazy, crazy. So that's some creative ways of doing some of those things. But remember, I just did to you what you don't do with clients. You don't surprise them. You let them know what the rules are. Always give them an out so that they don't have to talk. And but that's one way of story sharing. It's a very simple way. It's a good icebreaker too. And if you make it about Jose or Carrie or whoever, then it's easier to talk about them. Yeah. All right. Question.
I'm just wondering about your thoughts role playing, whether it's in individual counseling or in a group setting. So if we're looking at a therapeutic group or a psychoeducational group, having two of the folks in the group come up and do a role play, and then
Role playing's great. Anybody ever role play? Yeah, because no matter how you're going to fake it, eventually you get your own character out. I mean, who you choose, why you choose that person, those are all relevant pieces of information. We used to always laugh when we were counseling trainees, we'd have to role play clients, and so I'd get up in the morning and I'd brush my teeth, look in the mirror and think, okay, what's my problem today I'm going to talk about, And I'd sit down and I'd start to talk about a problem, and then next thing I know, a few probes and a few questions, I was talking about me. So you have to say you can stop anytime if it starts to feel uncomfortable. That's always, the out that you give during that. But role playing is great. It gives people a chance to kind of try to put themselves in someone else's shoes and do that. But you always get useful information out of it. Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Application with anxiety. A typical bibliotherapy session, by now you know, there's no typical session, is there? We talked about very creative ways. How many of you are more comfortable with structure? Yeah, more structure? Yeah, okay. So structure is great because, and this, I used to do this with lots of different groups and individual clients. Some clients, if you say to them, well, just go ahead and free write. They'll free write. Others, how much you want me to write about? What's the topic? How many sentences? Am I going to get graded? I mean, all of those kinds of things that that come with that. So, but structure can be very comforting. And as a client begins to feel more comfortable with talking with you and with the structure, they can actually break out of it, try things a different way. And you can always leave that open to them. But there's so many variations and so many ways to use books, cinema, stories, narrative, paragraphs, articles, information. But you do have some of the cautions too, that should be relevant, appropriate. And here's the other caution. If you open something up, you should always have resources for closing it down. The worst therapy I've ever seen is when people fillet people open and then they say, well, it was good for me, session's over. And you always have to make sure that there's numbers they can call. Do they have somebody to talk to? This might come up. Always caution. It might bring up some uncomfortable thing. Are you ready for it? They may think they're ready for it, but they might actually not be. I mean, I think that's the most important thing about any counseling process. Books are a lot more powerful than people think. When you relate to a character and you align with a character, or you align with a theme, or you align with a story, it's who you are. You're aligning for a reason. And when you have a good match and it really speaks to you, it's very, very powerful. So always make sure that people have someone to call. If they're in counseling, you have a counseling number for emergencies, right, for your students? Yeah. So they if this brings up some unsettling information and you need somebody to talk to, here you go. Does it make sense? Yeah. What are you thinking?
Now, I want to make a point here because I was in an educational setting one time where a person had a serious hearing impairment. And what we had to do in order to speak for him to hear us was to hold the microphone in our hand. He had a portable one. And people found it very frustrating. Okay. And I thought, how'd you like to live his life if you think this is frustrating? Okay. Point made. Ms. Brandt.
Thank you, Joe.
Brand to you.
Do you now remember what you were going to say?
Yes. It just had to do with having hotlines and
Right.
how important those hotlines are.
Right, yeah. And that is true. That's why I mentioned, always that opportunity to, and remember, process time, maybe during the session, maybe on the way home from the session, maybe on a Saturday night, sitting alone reading the book again, thinking, or writing something out. So it's always good. And ask people, do you have somebody to talk with? You connect with somebody? You'd be surprised how many people don't. You know, we think everyone's so socially connected, you know, and they're looking at their, you know, phones and everything all the time, but this is really not intimate, you know, that kind of connection that people need and we crave, you know. Okay, so working with helpers and colleagues, figure out your diagnosis, figure out your type of client, right, and all the other things that we've mentioned. Okay, so before we go to the summary, we're going to try something now. So let's take a little look here. I need you all to have about at least 3 people at your table. So if you have people left, we're going to kind of do an activity. We're going to need 3 people at each table. Yeah. You can have 4. 4 is good too. Okay. We're going to do a little psychoeducational moment. Okay? Okay. I'm going to go back here. And I'd like you to kind of look at one another. And I'm going to pretend that I'm your counselor and we're in a group. And we're having a psychoeducational session, and I'm going to actually just talk to you about mistaken beliefs. You know, so I'm just going to kind of pretend we're talking like that, and then I'm going to ask you as a group to do something. All right? Mistaken beliefs. Does anybody remember where the whole notion of mistaken beliefs came from in counseling and in psychotherapy? Anybody remember somebody named Ellis? Okay, you remember Ellis. Okay, so Ellis, Dr. Ellis, talked about these mistaken beliefs that we all have. And these mistaken beliefs can actually make us more anxious. Or they can make us, sometimes we develop a sense of guilt because we have mistaken beliefs around perfection or around not being embarrassed or publicly humiliated, or we also call them catastrophic thinking sometimes if we move it up to a higher level. Mistaken beliefs is cognitive behavioral therapy, mostly cognitive therapy. And so what I'm going to do right now is just going to read you a little information. I'd like you to just not read with me. I'd like you to kind of just put your heads like down just a little bit and just kind of think to yourself as I'm reading this what this might mean in your life, and see if you can come up with any examples of these concepts. Okay, it's going to be a short read. By now you might have asked, where does negative self-talk come from? Most cases, we can trace it back to deeper underlying beliefs that we live in with every day, or assumptions about ourselves. Sometimes we play scripts in our head. We have core beliefs. We make life decisions. But sometimes we have these mistaken beliefs that can be handed down to us from our families and where we've grown up. We might have beliefs like, I'm powerless, life's a struggle, I should always look good, you should always be nice to everybody. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Mistaken beliefs are at the root of much anxiety that we experience from day to day. You could save yourself quite a bit of anxiety or worrying if you let go of some basic assumptions. Like the thought that I must worry about a problem before there's any chance that it will possibly go away. Similarly, you might feel more confident and secure if you discarded a belief like, I'm nothing unless I succeed. I'm nothing unless others love me. I'm nothing unless others approve of me. It'd be a lot less stressful if I could let go of the belief, I must do it perfectly right or it's not worth doing at all. Mistaken beliefs can keep you from achieving your most important life goal. So, right now, if you could, write down maybe one of those fake beliefs or mistaken beliefs that you might have in your life, or write down one about somebody who you know and work with or live with, what they might think as a mistaken belief. Go ahead and do that quietly without sharing for about 1 minute or 2. Remember, we're not going to share just yet. Okay. Now, has everybody got one? Everybody got one? Raise your hand if you got one. Got one? Almost got one? All right. All right, so don't look up again. Just kind of look down again. I'm just going to read a little bit more to you, right? All right. I don't know what you wrote down. I don't know who you wrote about. But I'm going to read to you a few of the most fairly common mistaken beliefs that people hold in our society. You ready? All right, here goes. I'm powerless. I'm a victim to all outside circumstances. Life's a struggle. Something must be wrong if life seems too easy, if it's too much fun, or if things get pleasurable. If I take a risk, I'll fail. If I fail, no one will like me. I'm not important. My feelings are not important. My needs are not important. I should always look good, act nice, no matter how awful I feel. If I worry long enough, this problem should get better or go away, so I should worry all the time. I cannot cope with anything scary. The outside world is dangerous. There is only safety in what is known or familiar. Okay, all right. Now what I'd like you to do as a group, just kind of talk about the common beliefs that I just read to one another. And if you had one that kind of aligned with that, or was it surprising? Was it news to you? Do a lot of people you know believe these kinds of things? Just talk amongst yourselves for about 5 minutes, just kind of share and see what you come up with. And remember, if you don't feel comfortable talking, you don't have to talk. Okay. Hello. I'm going to call you kind of to close your conversation. And thanks, Joe. All right. So you all know each other in some form or fashion. So this can either be extremely awkward or or scrambling around with, what can I say, what can I not say, and so forth. But if you're in a group of unknown people, there's actually some freedom in that, because you can say things that, you're probably not going to run into somebody in the supermarket or at the late night Starbucks or someplace. You might, then you'll kind of do this thing with the cart, but most likely you won't. And so there's that sense of freedom that can come with a conversation like this as well. But let's kind of talk about the process. So I read you some information, right? That was your anchor. You could kind of think about a little bit, right? Then you were supposed to generate something from within and then share it, linked to the common things that people do, and then share kind of what you found. So what were your conversations like, and what was this process like for you, if you don't mind sharing? Thank you. Thank you.
I always get elected the speaker. We put it kind of on a second party or third person. When we talked about it, we talked about people we knew, not us.
Oh, good. Okay. Right.
Something else that we talked about is some of it is, especially in education, our own educational experiences, under the context of what your major was.
Oh.
Because Natalie's was music. Perfection is the
Yeah.
whole point.
Perfection is key, right?
Marie's was fine art, where you're allowed to be more creative. I was a business undergrad. He who dies with the most money wins. You know, if you can justify it, it's fine. And that was kind of Tara's thing with history. So we kind of talked a little bit about how what you're interested in sometimes puts external pressure on you.
Okay. All right. So the values really come. Yeah. That's. But would you have? Would that have come out without a prompt in a discussion like that? Yeah. So you, and that was interesting the way they themed
Speaker
around
shakes her head no vigorously.
So let's hear from another table.
Okay, no. So one thing I'm going to say is, what we were given and what we weren't. Now I'm looking at the screen and I'm seeing the opposite, the positive thought, and I'm going, huh? Aren't you withholding this
That's right. That's
from
right.
us? Okay.
No,
so
no reading ahead.
So rather than I am unimportant, I am valuable and a unique person, or I always should look good, act nice, no matter how I feel.
Right.
It's okay to simply be myself.
Right, and part of bibliotherapy and my treatment intervention or my technique would be, it's easy to kind of talk about our mistaken beliefs and then how you can reframe them and look at them. And here's your reframes here, yeah. So you get the group to work together to pick one thing and see if they can come up with different reframes. And so everybody, and so it's because sometimes your reframe for your own thing might not be as good as your partner at the table or someone else. So, and that's the whole nice thing about the group work or working with a counselor or working with an author of a book, because this author gives us lots of reframes, lots of ways to twist it around and turn it into a positive belief versus something that, may be holding us back and causing us problems. So let's hear from another table.
So this is my supervision group, so I'm very comfortable sharing with them. And they're all counselors. And so my mistaken belief, I think it's above what we can see, but I think it says, if I take risks, I'll fail, and if I fail, I'll be rejected.
Right.
And each one of them said one of the things that's on the board there.
It's okay for me to take risks. So
They're very good
they help you
counselors.
reframe, right? It's okay to fail. I can learn a lot from every mistake. It's okay for me to be, it's okay for me to be a success.
Yeah, and it felt good for them to challenge, what I was thinking, because otherwise I would not, I would not be doing that to myself.
Oh, okay. How many of you think that fear of failure is a common issue? Yeah, especially with students. And then of course all of you are professionals and you've gotten to where you are because you had to deal with certain fear of failure. So yeah, but it's a very, very common thing, and it can be immobilizing. Yeah, that's where anxiety comes from, and test anxiety and performance anxiety and all that. So let's hear from one more group. Anybody over on this side?
I'll share a funny story since I've asked you all, or stuffed a microphone in front of your face when you've shared your stories today. But this morning when I came in, I was talking to Teresa, and I told her, I said, just as I was leaving the house, I got a run in my pantyhose. And I hate pantyhose, but you have to wear pantyhose to look good, and you have to look good. That's just something you have to do. And so Teresa said, well, I don't wear pantyhose. I hate them. And I said, so if your legs were just bare and you had on shoes, you just walk around like that? She says, yeah, I do it all the time. So I thought, wow, well, maybe I could not wear pantyhose and it would be all right. And I would still, be okay. It's not the end of the world. It's not that you just have to, I guess the idea of looking good is not, I don't have to have this kind of really strict, pristine idea of, that includes pantyhose. So. Professionalism, yes. Yes, that too. Absolutely. Yes, right. Exactly.
And I
Thank
feel
you.
really honored that you've worn pantyhose. Well, I'll tell you an even funnier story. I got to the airport and I put my legs, because I wore sheer hose today, and I put my little legs next to the chair and I felt, uh-oh. I thought, what is that? And I looked down on the seat. You know how they have that kind of sticky Velcro thing on the seats? So when the plane goes down, and I thought, I gotta. And it was just a little pull, and I thought, what the heck am I gonna do now? I got no pantyhose. I'm flying to Chicago, I'm on a tight schedule and everything. I opened up my purse. I had some poppy nylon, some nail polish, and right there on my stocking. And I had to teach somebody the other day who was 22 who didn't know that you could fix hose from running with nail polish. Information just shifts with generations. So let's work on that theme, how we look. Ready? Okay. I'm going to read you, now we've moved from workbook. I'm going to show you. So I'm going to find something that fits with, I got to look perfect. I got to look good. Okay, all right. I should have been thinking about God, or the meaning of life, or simply grieving the fact that my best friend was now motherless and my own mother was without her best friend. Instead, I found myself gazing into the sleek mahogany coffin lined with generous folds of ivory silk, silently critiquing Mrs. Carr's lipstick. A magenta with blue undertones that simply clashed with her coral dress. The same one she had worn to Lucy's wedding nearly 5 years ago. More problematic than the shade of lipstick, though, was the application. Someone clearly low on the beauty industry totem pole had colored just outside the lines as if to create fuller lips. It was an optical illusion that never fooled anyone and seemed wholly unnecessary given the circumstances. After all, there would be no photos taken today, no professional albums filled with various combinations of friends and family posing with Mrs. Carr, horizontal but front and center. In fact, the entire custom of fancying up a corpse for an open casket funeral seemed suddenly ridiculous. Cremation was definitely the way to go. It was the way I wanted to go, rather than the risk of the possibility of going out on a bad hair day. I would like you to think about, I've always got to be perfect. I always have to look good. I can't go outside if I have a run in my hose, or my lipstick is on my teeth, or running up my cracks. Okay? I'd like you to write down just a little paragraph about this person and looking perfect and critiquing perfection. Anybody want to share what they wrote in reaction to? It's okay.
Should I make Tara do it? Okay, go ahead.
You don't have to make me do anything. I'm ready. All right.
All right.
So I couldn't really get a paragraph out, but what I did write down, I said, well, in the end, it doesn't really matter what you look like. People don't remember that. They remember what you did, who you were. And then I said, but then I thought about my grandmother, and all I really remember about her the most is her red lipstick, which is what I wrote down, and that's why I wear lipstick all the time now. But I do remember a lot more about her life. So I was like, oh, that's a contradicting attitude to what I already thought about, that people don't remember what you look like. So I don't know what that says, but that's what I wrote down.
And then someone at your group might say to you, you don't know what that says, but maybe it says something to someone else. It struck something for someone else. Does anybody want to add any reactions to what Tara said? In there? Oh, hold it.
He's coming.
I think I just had a whole bunch of different thoughts about appearance and society's expectation about appearance. And so my head went in a million different directions. I used to work at a dental office that helped put me through college, and I would walk in every Saturday. I also worked at the mall, but Saturdays I worked at the dental office, and the first thing my aunt would say to me is, or she'd like, you know, go put on lipstick, right? Because I'd come without a lick of makeup on my face. And so then the joke became every Saturday that I'd have to go to her office and paint my face because she expected me to meet my future husband at the dental office, which I did. So, but society's expectations, but my mom was never like that. She never put pressure on me to look a certain way before I left the house. But I had aunts who would always pressure me, like, you know, do you want to put a little blush on? You know, where's your lipstick?
Yeah,
So that's
tired,
kind of, yeah, you look tired. Yeah. So I kind of went there, and I totally agree with what Tara's saying, is that at the end of the day, what really matters is not how you look, but the impression you have on people, right? What are they going to remember about you the most?
Is it Teresa?
I went in a totally different direction because
Wait a
I
minute.
know,
Freeze
shocking.
Frame. Freeze frame. Okay. Did you hear what she just said? She went in a totally different direction. So someone built off what Tara was saying, right? Tell me your name. Suzanne. And then Teresa said, I went in a totally different direction. That is the great thing about reading a paragraph or talking about something or a short story or film. We take what we need from it. That's kind of hits us in whatever our place is. So take us to your different direction.
Well, I went into counselor analyzing the writer and the character. And, you know, I first went to kind of narrow, constricted, confined, maybe family background has a focus on looks. And then I went to, you know, wonder how she feels about her own looks. Then I went to, well, maybe she's an artist and color's really important to her. I just went into all these different areas. So, which is what I tend to do a lot, is the world of possibilities in an intuitive sense. So it kind of speaks to my personality, I guess.
Right, of course. And that's what bibliotherapy does. It aligns with who you are and your personality, where you need to take it, where you want to go with it. What about over here? Yeah.
So I kind of went on the same path that Teresa did, except that I was thinking of this person's reaction to what she was experiencing when she said, I should have been thinking about God, I should have been thinking about my best friend. And I felt like maybe it was just a distraction for her to focus on something that maybe wasn't meaningful, so that she didn't have to deal with that was meaningful, and to get into those feelings of negativity and a strange area for her maybe that she just wasn't comfortable with.
So, how willing are you to play the microphone game? Can we continue this story? Some of you up for it? Up for it? Okay. Any hands for up for it? You don't have to all play, but if you're up for it, put your hand up. All right, that's enough hands. All right, Joe, you ready? Let's take a look. All right. Where did I put the book? Oh, it's right here? Thank you. Somebody's paying attention. Appreciate it. Okay. All right, ready? All right. Cremation was definitely the way to go. It was certainly the way I wanted to go, rather than risk the possibility of going out on a bad hair day. Hands. Hands. And then,
because I always look so great with my platinum blonde hair. That's all I ever wanted, was to be really, really blonde. I think we'd nothing worse than dying without really, really blonde hair. Except for dying alone.
Okay. Now, Tara, give it to some. Hands up.
Anybody? I got someone over here. Oh my gosh. All right. I'll go for Lynn.
At least I finally lost that last 10 pounds before I went.
Well, I believe, like Les Brown does, in the one box per person rule. One person per box rule.
I don't know why I'm focusing on the lipstick, but I know when I was a kid, my mom painted my room the magenta color. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Boy, talking about moms, when I was a little kid, my mom wore red lipstick all the time. And we used to sit in the bathroom and she'd be putting on her makeup and combing her hair, and I'd sit on the edge of the tub. And we'd have the most grand mom and Dale time in the world. And to this day, I love to wear red lipstick because I always remember my mama. What about your mama? See?
You don't want to ask.
See? And she says, you don't want to ask me. So I'll ask someone else.
Want to know about my mom?
Do I want to know about your mom? I want to know whatever you want to tell me.
Sweet and kind and just joyful to everybody.
Okay, so you can see where this could go? Yeah. I don't want to know about my mom, but I don't know your mom. So, and my mom still wears red lipstick. She does. She's 84. So you can see how this could, where's Joe? Gone. I'll put it over here. This is the table where the mic goes. So you can see how this, now the other thing that I could have done is said to you, why don't you write down what happens next? Okay, she said, I'd rather be cremated than die on a bad hair day, you know. So what does that, and that could go in all kinds of directions, like what kind of directions could it go in when you talk about cremation? How could that go? You could go in directions about talking about mamas or daddies. There's a wonderful children's book that's called Mama Had a Dancing Heart. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story about a young girl who grows up and she becomes a ballerina. And her mom's obviously gone, her mom's dead. But she talks about career decisions and her love of her mom and how it influenced her. It's great you could segue into career counseling, why we make the choices we make, why we choose the professions we get. And it also can talk about loss. You know, your mama had a dancing heart. Doesn't have one now. What does that mean? Or how about, somebody might say, my mama didn't have a dancing heart. You know, my mom had something else. You know, so it just kind of depends on where you want to go. You can go into relationships with people. But the thing about informed consent, when you're talking about subject group and you invite people in for a group to work on things, the topic, you talk to them about, these are the topics we're going to go to. It might be uncomfortable. You can choose to participate however you want to participate, or say, I don't want to talk about that. Okay, well, let's go to go to the next person. No judgment, no extra pressure. You just keep going like that. People participate at whatever level that they're comfortable in, and that's the really gift of using materials like this. And you can always dive into the text again. So the reason I wanted to take that particular thing about the lipstick, because I thought it was pretty relevant to, I should always look good. I should always act nice, no matter how I feel.